Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. The final test of all 6 Blast Tier 3s. We've got Jean Grey, we've got Doctor Strange, Cyclops, we've got Magneto, probably the worst, Iron Man, and then Captain America, Sharon Rogers. Now, all 6 of them are going to be equipped with CTPs of Rage, except for Sharon Rogers, because she does better, frankly, with the CTP of Energy. But otherwise, their builds are pretty much identical, and they're going for, of course, max crit rate and max dodge in order to capitalize on that CTP of Rage. So we're going to go into now the same stage of Cull Obsidian World Boss and test them out there. I choose Cull Obsidian World Boss because he is the most sort of even-tempered boss. He's got the highest defenses, but unlike Ebony, he doesn't have a penalty against non-elemental damage, so that would be something to consider. It would give characters like Jean Grey an unfair advantage, and Cyclops as well. And then with Thanos, he's a bit weird, and he's a much more challenging world boss, so you might not get as good of a barometer because we have to go to a much lower level. I mean, the highest level I've unlocked for him is 39, but we would probably have to go down to 20 to make a viable comparison because unfortunately, some of these tier 3 blast types can't compete past 30 anyways. So I think Cull Obsidian provides the best option here. We want to go to a very high level because we don't want the characters to blow through and do too much damage. We're just going to be testing it in a 1-minute increment for each of the characters. We're going to be going into a stage 45, which is, again, high enough with enough HP and enough defenses for Cull Obsidian that, you know, no one's going to blow through it. But additionally, it's also going to be a good level to test it at because my cards are very good, my raid level is very good, and all of these characters have CTPs of Rage, which is definitely something to take into consideration. So for this team up, I was originally going to use Ebony Maw's leadership for all of them, but we're actually going to swap and use Wasp because of the fact that she provides debuff. So they're all going to have 23% attack, which is definitely lower than some of their own native leaderships, like Cyclops, like Doctor Strange. That's okay. The only character we're going to give a bit of an advantage to, I should say, it's not a slight advantage, it's a little bit more than slight, is Magneto. We're going to use Magneto's 45% all attack bonus rather than the 23 because he desperately needs it, and you'll see. Even with this being said, he is far behind any of the other tier 3s. But we're not going to start off with Magneto because we don't want to start off with something so slow. So we're actually going to drop in with Doctor Strange first. It is a 7% difference here, 30% versus 23. But trust me, Doctor Strange does not need it. And I'm not sure if Wasp is going to strike for any of these characters. She might strike for Iron Man, but it's not going to be a big deal. She's just not going to do very much damage. And of course, we're not going to be using any strikers for the same reason, as we don't want any sort of, you know, miscalculation of the damage here. This is not the most scientific test, but this will give you a good barometer, and this will let you know which of these characters you may want to invest in the future. Now, Doctor Strange has the easiest rotation. He's got the easiest time with Cull Obsidian, I would say, just because he just locks him in place, and we don't really have to do anything except spam through the skills and then spam through the tier 3. We obviously would prefer if the tier 3 lands during the Rage proc rotation, but we're not going to stand around and wait because unlike every other character, his tier 3 is so easily spammable that sooner or later it will line up with the Rage proc, so you don't really have to worry about that. You just keep going, and you know you're going to get the damage either way. It's just going to be incremented in smaller or larger bits. But because of his all defense down and because of the extreme spammability of his tier 3 skill, you can see here every 10 seconds or less we're getting off another tier 3 skill. This quickly becomes a race to the finish line for Doctor Strange, and it's absurd how much damage he does in a minute. He almost gets this kill with 0 strikers and basically just 1 big time support against Cull Obsidian stage 45. So we got down to 7 bars and change, which is the scientific method we're going to be using here. Doctor Strange completely blows through. Let me just note this down and we'll continue on with the next character. So jumping into the next clear, we're going to swap over to Jean Grey, and you know, in Jean's case, she does get the leadership bonus there from Wasp that she wouldn't otherwise get. I would say that while Jean is probably not going to put out as much damage as Doctor Strange, she is definitely the safest. After Doctor Strange, I would say she's the safest character to play as. She probably might even be safer than Doctor Strange because even if you make a mistake with her and you get hit by Cull Obsidian, even if he kills you, you still aren't dead. You're only half dead. Whereas with Doctor Strange, although it's a lot harder to make a mistake because he's constantly being mind controlled, the penalty for making a mistake with Doctor Strange is that he will kill you and you'll have to start all over again. So I would say that that is something that matters here, but because her tier 3 skill does not have all defense down, because she doesn't have all defense down on any of her skills, and because she's dealing elemental damage, which is preferably better used and better utilized against Ebony Maw and his lower defenses, which she can then lower even further with the fire resistance down on her tier 3 skill. Because of that, she actually does struggle a little bit more against Cull Obsidian than I think people might expect, especially when you put her in stark contrast to someone like Doctor Strange, who completely just blows through blows through Cull Obsidian like butter. He basically does to Cull Obsidian what she might be doing to Ebony. So we're gonna get down here. We're gonna let this proc. We'll give her an extra second there just to be fine. But man, it's a huge difference here. She's at 12 1/4 bar remaining, whereas Doctor Strange was at 7 3/4 of a bar. That's insane. That's, you know, more than five bars of difference in terms of damage, which is almost double the amount of damage, which really illustrates the power of all defense down, especially on a tier 3 skill that is spammable. And that's what makes Doctor Strange so good against Cull Obsidian. Also, part of the reason why I wanted to test against Cull Obsidian is because he's by far one of the most annoying world boss ultimates. So I think a lot of people look at their next blast tier 3 and they wonder, well, how good is this character going to be against Cull Obsidian specifically? So this gives you a nice barometer, and I think even without a CTP of Rage, you're going to get very similar results to what you're seeing right now because of things like all defense down. Now, Magneto, I'm a little bit worried about. I'm a little bit scared that I can't survive, so we're going to have to maybe talk a little bit less and pay more attention. Now, we gave him the additional 45% leadership, so he's basically got an extra 20-ish% to go ahead and stack on top instead of just Wasp's 23%, so he does have a bit of an unfair advantage, but that also comes with an extremely anemic showing as far as his damage is concerned. And with Cull Obsidian deciding to cleanse, it also reduces, I mean, the all defense down actually doesn't even apply. So this is a further problem that is illustrated by the recent changes to all defense down, and, you know, some of them ignore immunity, some of them don't. Well, it turns out that Magneto is actually even worse now. We're actually just going to try to proc throughout the tier 3 skill rather than doing sort of an ABX rotation, because we got literally 0 damage from that, and part of the reason is because his all defense down doesn't apply. So on top of having extremely low damage, not only on his regular skills but on his tier 3 skill, he also doesn't have any all defense down that he can apply. So we're gonna let this ride out, but you can see here that we're talking at best I would have done about 14.5 bars in the 1 minute. Now, could he have possibly finished this fight? Yeah, maybe. But man, it's in stark contrast. Now, he'll get a lot of help from all defense down strikers, but he has, not only does he have low damage on most of his skills, I mean, most of his skills besides 4, 5, and 2 deal extremely low damage. So on top of that, his tier 3 skill doesn't have a lot of damage, and it's also spread out. His tier 3 skill takes a long time. Takes more than 5 seconds to fully animate, and that puts him definitely at a disadvantage compared to other characters. Even with a CTP of Rage, it really doesn't do enough for Magneto to really hide that fact. So now we're going to contrast Magneto with Cyclops here, and although Cyclops doesn't have his own leadership, he does have the 30% buff. But man, I think Cyclops is going to be... He might be around Jean's level. He also unfortunately doesn't have all defense down. Only Doctor Strange and Iron Man are the only ones on this list who have all defense down. So it's interesting to see how much of an impact it makes against a tier 3 or against a world boss like Cull Obsidian. We're gonna, to the benefit of Cyclops, we're gonna try to. Wow, I don't know how we went more than 10 seconds without any sort of crit, but we were going to try to land the 5th skill on the proc, but it was just taking forever, so we're actually just going to go ahead and just try to spam the tier 3 skill instead of being a bit more clever about it, just because, Cyclops is running out of time. He's already halfway into this, and he's struggling to put up the damage that I expected him to put up, partially because we weren't critting for the first 10 seconds, and partially because without all defense down strikers, it's just his base damage, and that's where someone like Sharon really shines, because even though she doesn't have all defense down, unlike Magneto, and then to a lesser extent Cyclops, man, like she puts it down damage-wise to an extent that we've basically never seen before. Her damage is absolutely absurd. But we're gonna let this play out here, and we're gonna just do this one more. And so it's not quite Jean's level. It's, yeah, I'm actually a bit surprised. It's a bit lower than I thought it would be. He's at 15.25. He actually didn't get as far as Magneto. Is that really possible that he was actually worse than Magneto? How? I want to try that one again. All right, so we're gonna give this one a second pass. I'm too skeptical that Magneto got down to 14.5 bars and Cyclops was only able to deal 15.5. But this time around, rather than going with the sort of augmented, I had changed the rotation a little bit. Rather than going with that one, we're just gonna go with the one that we normally do, assuming Cyclops has his all defense down strikers and things are just going normally, just to see what happens. But I am shocked that Cyclops' damage was that low. I did not expect that at all, and even with the interruptions and things, it's wow. I'm just shocked that his damage is so low, because he has pretty high base damage on his tier 3 skill. It's not Sharon Rogers level, but it is a lot higher than Magneto's, or so I thought, and he does better than Magneto in in ABX. So I just thought it would translate to other game modes. But this is, yeah, I mean, this is sad. He's having difficulty critting in order to trigger the rage proc, but even still, even with all these mistakes, that was my best run, I think. How was this run worse? This is blowing my mind that he's actually this bad without all defense down strikers. And it basically just, it goes to show you that the strikers do mask, or the strikers do add a lot of potential. Now, does that mean that Magneto is a better tier 3 than Cyclops? No, that's not what this is indicating. But what it is indicating, perhaps, is that from the elemental damage perspective, and then from the fact that he doesn't have any all defense down strikers, it appears that Cyclops may struggle more. Now, you wouldn't necessarily go in world boss with no strikers. That would be kind of silly. But at the same time, you do want to get a feel for how much of the damage is coming from the character and how much of the damage is coming from their effects of their skills, whether it's self buffs, which Magneto has some self buffs, whereas Cyclops doesn't have any. Jean has even better self buffs with like the 40 all attack, 40 crit rate. Doctor Strange has insane buffs on top of having all defense down. So you do want to look for those sorts of things, and you do want to get a better idea of what's going on, so that you can, you know, not only build the character more carefully and more successfully, but also so that if something goes wrong, you know what's going on and you can adjust. Now, one thing I do want to say, and I was actually really excited to make this video for this reason, is I've gotten a lot better at playing Iron Man. I must say, I enjoy the character a lot, and I feel like my playthrough and my playstyle for him has improved a lot. I still make mistakes here and there, but I think he's a lot more fun to play than I gave him credit for, and he deals good damage. As you can see, we're already at Cyclops' level basically, and we're going to be able to put even more into this. The all defense down is absolutely helping here, but he's just got a lot of weapons to throw at Cull Obsidian. We're going to try proccing with 5 as well. Very nice there. The 4 is a little bit too long to squeeze in here, but we're going to get just a little bit more residual damage. We're going to get one final snap in, and this one, again, it's interesting. They're all right around the same amount, so we'll call this one about 13.5. It's a little bit less than 13.5 bars, but not quite Jean's level, but not quite that far off. And so the all defense down is definitely helping him out and pushing him a little bit further than Magneto, a little bit further than Cyclops, but I was a bit off on some of the tier 3 skills, and again, Iron Man does benefit from strikers more than maybe some of these other characters do, but definitely benefits less than some other characters. Like Magneto and Cyclops definitely need it a lot, and it really, really augments their damage. Now, Sharon doesn't have all defense down, but what she does have is an insane self buff. Now, it's a bit peculiar. You have to sort of time it properly, and I know you guys are still going to give me crap about her rotation being bad, but I think this works for me, guys. But yeah, she does a mountain of damage. I mean, she does have the self buff. She does have the crit rate buff on her 5th skill, but you really just need to get hammered. You need to get hammered in order to pop that tier 3 skill, but when you pop that tier 3 skill, oh boy, it's just pure DPS. So actually, I did not expect Once again, I underestimate a little bit Netmarble's baby, Sharon Rogers. I didn't expect her damage to be this good. We might get down to... She might be the closest to Doctor Strange, actually. And that was some nice accumulation there. We're going to be a little bit awkward here with the tier 3, but hopefully he hits us. I don't think we did get hit too much there, so it's not gonna generate as much for the accumulation. But with this last one here, let's see what we get. We're going to proc on 4 instead of 5 there. All you Sharon Rogers fans are happy for that because we have our new second place contestant. So it's actually pretty interesting. We basically call this 10 bars. So she was as close. She was closer than Jean Grey when it came to Doctor Strange. So very, very interesting. Let me throw up the final numbers here. We had Doctor Strange at 7 3/4 bar. I called it 7 1/4, but it was actually 7 3/4. We had Jean Grey. Well, I guess Sharon Rogers would be second. Sharon Rogers at 10 bars, Jean at 12 1/4. Then you had Iron Man at 13 1/4. Then Magneto 14 1/4. Cyclops 15, or sorry, Magneto 14 1/2. Cyclops 14 1/2. No quarters there. The only quarter there was Doctor Strange and Jean Grey. But man, I'm surprised. Now, I wouldn't rank these characters personally based on this DPS checklist. So I just want to make that clear as well. I do not think under any circumstances that Magneto is better than Cyclops. The only possible game mode that Magneto might be better than Cyclops in is Shadowland, and that's it. But I am interested by the fact that without strikers, Cyclops does suffer a lot. So maybe take that into consideration when you're playing with Cyclops, even at tier 2, that he really does benefit from those all defense down strikers. Don't stack the deck with all defense down strikers, but choose them carefully. And perhaps if you're not getting the results that you need, you just need to restart and try it again and maybe get a little bit luckier with some of the strikers. But man, Magneto was not as bad as I thought looking at it. I mean, he's not that far off from Iron Man. I really expected Magneto to be worse. I did give him a bit of an unfair advantage, so maybe he would be closer to Cyclops if that were the case. And actually, you know what? I'm kind of curious what that would be if I gave him Wasp's leadership instead. So yeah, not quite as good, but honestly not as bad. I mean, I gave him a bit more time, but at the same time, he's pretty close to where he was, so actually it didn't make as much of a difference as I thought. The additional, whatever it is, 22%, didn't really account for much more damage, but I do think that proccing his tier 3 skill with a couple of seconds left on his rage proc is actually still better than the regular rotation where you try to proc at the beginning. It really does take about 3 seconds to wind up. So yeah, that is the sort of result of all 6 tier 3s taking on Cull Obsidian World Boss. Definitely check out my rankings for the tier 3 characters if you are more curious about that. Don't take this test as the final word on their placement, although I do think some of them are accurate. I think Doctor Strange is probably the best overall, and Sharon and Jean are right there. But I do think Iron Man is a lot closer to Sharon, and then I do think Cyclops is a lot closer to Iron Man, and then I do think Magneto lags quite a bit behind the rest, but that's just my personal take. In my opinion, not the truth. The truth is really what you make of it. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you want to see next on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later. Take care.